But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Don't you love the King James? I mean, the original King James. Enticed. Most of you that use the King James are probably used to a revision of the King James that came out in the 1800s, early 1800s, and changed a lot of the spellings and a lot of the words to equivalent words. And, so you're used to it saying enticed. But 1611, real King James, enticed. So we have this passage here in James chapter 1, verse 14. So we'll talk a little bit about translations and about lust. I read this in the previous lesson in the New International. And I didn't notice at the time they had inserted a word that's not in the original Greek. And that's the problem with a dynamic equivalency translation, is there's a certain amount of interpretation going on. However, there is no such thing as a fully static translation. There's always a certain amount of interpretation going on. Which of two very similar words should be used in English to translate this Greek word that doesn't really fit either of them? So there's interpretation. The more dynamic the equivalence is, the more interpretation is involved. Now, that makes it easier to understand, and it's a good thing. And I use the New International all the time, and I use the New Century all the time. And it's very dynamic. But if one is studying, one needs multiple translations. And having the King James as one of them is a good thing to have. It's very static in most places. There's a few places where it goes dynamic. But in this case, they've interpreted evil desires, where this says lust. The word evil isn't there. We have a problem with this word lust because it has changed its meaning in the past 400 and some odd years. What it meant in 1611 is not what it means on the street today. Did not have the insinuation of fornication that it has today. And the Greek word here that it translates does not have that insinuation. It is the word strong desire. Epithumia, a strong desire. He's carried away by his strong desires. Well, strong desires are bad. Epithumia is always bad. It's always a bad word. Well, you got a problem with that. You go to Luke chapter 22 and verse 13, and it says here, verse 15, I'm sorry, I misread it. And he said to them, with desire I have desired to eat this Passover with you. Same Greek word. And who is it that is desiring this? With this strong desire? It's Jesus, who was tempted in all things, and yet without sin. Without sin. So it is not a sin to have strong desire. Well, what's James saying here? He's saying you're carried away by your desire. That's right. Jesus was tempted in all points like we are. and without sin, we fall for these strong desires. It's okay to have strong desires. It's what you do in response to them that sometimes is a problem. John says in his first letter, general letter, 1 John, and somewhere in chapter 3, it says, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, are not of the Father, but are of the world. And the world passes away, and the lusts thereof, but he who does the will of God abides forever. Now, talks a lot about desire, or in the King James, lust. Desires, the desires of this world. Get caught up in it, and you get turned away from God. I did a lesson on that. If you've got those little flags at the top, you should be seeing that little flag right about now up top of your screen, and you can click on it and go to that lesson. But what James is saying here is that God does not set you up to be tempted and fall into sin. You've got these strong desires. And some of them, there's nothing wrong with them in the beginning. But you want them so much, you do things you should not do. You want to get married. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get married. But you cut corners to get there. Now you've got a problem. You want to be able to take care of your family. Nothing wrong with that. But you cut corners to make that money. You want to preach the gospel full time. Nothing wrong with that. But you falsely portray yourself so that people won't know who you really are, because you're afraid that if they knew who you really were, they would not endorse you to be full-time as a gospel preacher. And so you become a hypocrite, a sinner. You were tempted and you fell. The desire itself is not bad. What you do with it can be a very bad thing.